The afternoon sun beat down on the outdoor cafe where Sarah Mitchell sat alone, her dark sunglasses hiding tired eyes that had seen more than most people could imagine. She wore simple civilian clothes, a plain t-shirt and jeans, her brown hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Nothing about her appearance suggested the grueling 20-hour days she had been putting in, or the classified operations that filled her military record. Sarah had arrived in San Diego 3 days earlier, 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The Navy had given her this brief window of anonymity before she would take command of SEAL Team 7. It was standard procedure for incoming commanders, a chance to observe and assess without the formal barriers that rank created. She would attend the mandatory team barbecue today as just another face in the crowd. Listening and watching, getting a feel for the unit she would soon lead, her coffee sat untouched on the table. Sarah had learned long ago to trust her instincts, and right now, something felt off. She glanced at her phone, checking the address one more time. The beach barbecue was still 2 hours away. But she had wanted to scout the area first. A habit ingrained by years of operational planning. 3 men approached from her left, their voices carrying across the quiet patio. They wore Navy t-shirts, their athletic builds and confident swagger, marking them as special operations even out of uniform. Sarah recognized the type immediately. She had served alongside hundreds of men like them, had earned their respect through blood, sweat, and countless missions that pushed human endurance to its limits. The tallest one, a blond man with a cocky grin, noticed her first. He elbowed his companion, a stocky guy with a thick neck and arms covered in tattoos. The third man, lean and wiry with a sharp face, hung back slightly but watched with obvious interest. Sarah kept her eyes forward, sipping her coffee. She had dealt with this before, too many times to count. In her line of work, being underestimated was sometimes an advantage. Other times, it was just exhausting. "Hey there," the blonde one called out, changing direction to approach her table. His friends followed, forming a loose semicircle around her small table. "You look a little lost. Need some help finding your way?" Sarah set down her cup carefully, her expression neutral. "I'm fine, thanks." The stocky one leaned against the empty chair across from her, his grin widening. "Come on, don't be like that. We're just being friendly. You new around here?" "Just visiting," Sarah replied, her tone polite but distant. She had perfected this balance over the years. Professional enough to avoid confrontation, but cold enough to discourage further interaction. The wiry one stepped closer, his eyes scanning her with obvious appraisal. "Visiting? All alone? That's a shame. Lucky for you, we know all the best spots in San Diego. We could show you around." Sarah felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the frustration she always pushed down. She had jumped out of helicopters into hostile territory, cleared buildings under enemy fire, had made split-second decisions that saved lives. But here, in a peaceful cafe in her own country, she was just another woman being bothered by men who saw her as entertainment. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm actually meeting someone," she said. Checking her phone for emphasis, the blonde one laughed. Pulling out the chair and sitting down without invitation. "Meeting someone? I don't see anyone. Come on, have a drink with us first." "We're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" Sarah asked, despite herself. "We just got back from a training rotation," the stocky one said, puffing out his chest. 3 months of hell. "We're SEALs, part of Team 7. Maybe you've heard of us." Sarah's eyebrow raised slightly behind her sunglasses. Team 7. Her new command. These were her men, or would be in 2 weeks. She studied them more carefully now, noting the pride in their voices, the easy camaraderie between them. Good operators, probably, but clearly lacking in judgment at the moment. "I've heard of the SEALs," she said carefully. "Yeah, well, we're the best of the best," the wiry one said. "Not everyone can do what we do. It takes a special kind of person." The blonde one signaled the waiter, ordering a round of beers without asking if Sarah wanted one. "So what do you do?" "Let me guess, teacher? Nurse?" Sarah felt the old anger stir, the kind she had learned to channel into motivation rather than letting it show. "Something like that." The beers arrived, and the blonde one pushed one across the table to her. "Drink up. You look like you could use some fun. All work and no play, right?" "I don't drink on duty," Sarah said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. The three men exchanged glances, then burst into laughter. "On duty?" the stocky one repeated. "What? You a security guard or something?" Sarah remained silent, recognizing her mistake. She should have just made an excuse and left, but exhaustion had made her careless. The past months of preparation for this command had been intense. Endless briefings and planning sessions, political maneuvering at levels that still felt foreign to her despite her rank. "Come on." "Don't be stuck up," the blonde one said, his tone shifting from playful to annoyed. "We're just trying to be nice. Have a drink with us." "I said no, thank you," Sarah replied, her voice firmer now. The wiry one reached across and picked up her coffee cup, holding it away from her with a mocking smile. "Maybe you need something stronger than coffee." "You seem tense." Sarah stood up, her patience finally exhausted. "I need to go." But as she moved to leave, the blonde one stood as well, blocking her path. He held his beer up, that cocky grin back on his face. "Just one drink. Don't be rude." What happened next occurred in slow motion. Sarah saw the intention in his eyes, a split second before he acted, but she was hemmed in by the table and chairs. The blonde one tipped his beer forward, and the cold liquid splashed across her shirt, soaking through to her skin. The shock of it froze everyone for a moment. Then the stocky one laughed and followed suit, dumping his beer over her head. The liquid ran down her face, into her eyes, dripping from her hair. "Drink up, loser!" the wiry one shouted, adding his beer to the mess. "Guess you're not too good for us now, huh?" The cafe had gone completely silent. Other patrons stared in horror, but no one moved to intervene. The three seals were laughing, high-fiving each other. Clearly pleased with their prank, Sarah stood perfectly still, beer dripping from her clothes and hair. Her sunglasses had been knocked askew, and she slowly removed them, revealing eyes that were cold and hard as steel. She looked at each man in turn, memorizing their faces, though she knew she would not forget this moment. "You boys have fun today," she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that cut through their laughter. "Enjoy yourselves." Something in her tone made the blonde one hesitate, his grin faltering. "Hey, it was just a joke." "Don't get all emotional about it." Sarah picked up her bag, which had thankfully been spared the worst of the beer shower. She pulled out her wallet and left cash on the table for her coffee. More than enough to cover it, and the mess they had created. "See you around," she said, and walked away without looking back. Behind her, she heard them laughing again, making jokes about uptight women and how she should learn to take a joke. Sarah kept walking, her jaw clenched, her wet clothes uncomfortable in the warm sun. She made it to her rental car before allowing herself any reaction. Sitting in the driver's seat, she looked at herself in the rearview mirror. Beer still dripped from her hair, and her shirt was ruined. She looked like exactly what those men had tried to make her. A victim, someone to be dismissed and humiliated. But Sarah Mitchell was nobody's victim. She was a decorated naval officer with 15 years of service. She had earned her SEAL trident through the same brutal training that those men had completed, had proven herself in combat zones across 3 continents. In 2 weeks, she would take command of SEAL Team 7. And those 3 men would discover exactly who they had dumped their drinks on. Sarah started the car and drove back to her hotel. She had a barbecue to attend in a few hours, and she needed to clean up. But more importantly, she needed to think. This incident had shown her something valuable about the culture she was about to step into, about the attitudes she would need to change. Command was never easy, especially in the special operations community where tradition and brotherhood ran deep. Being one of the first women to command a SEAL team meant every decision would be scrutinized, every order questioned until she proved herself beyond any doubt. Today had been a setback, a moment of disrespect that would have broken someone with less experience. But Sarah had faced worse challenges. She had survived Hell Week, the legendary 5.5-day ordeal that separated SEAL candidates from everyone else. She had earned the respect of men who had initially refused to train alongside a woman. She had led missions where failure meant death, and she had brought everyone home alive. 3 drunk idiots with superiority complexes were not going to shake her resolve. As Sarah pulled into the hotel parking lot, her phone buzzed with a message from the Team 7 executive officer, confirming details for the barbecue. She responded quickly, then headed inside to shower and change. 2 hours later, dressed in fresh, casual clothes with her hair dried and styled, Sarah looked nothing like the beer-soaked woman from the cafe. She checked herself in the mirror one last time, noting the controlled expression, the calm demeanor that gave nothing away. She grabbed her keys and headed out. The barbecue was about to begin, and Sarah wanted to arrive on time. She had a team to meet, a command to prepare for, and 3 men who had no idea what was coming their way. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon as she drove toward the beach, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It was the kind of perfect San Diego evening that reminded people why they loved this city. But Sarah's mind was not on the scenery. She was thinking about leadership, about respect, and about the lessons she would need to teach in the coming weeks. This was going to be interesting. The beach parking lot was already crowded when Sarah arrived. Pickup trucks and SUVs filled every available space, many with military-base stickers on their windshields. She could hear music and laughter drifting from the beach, the unmistakable sound of a gathering in full swing. Sarah parked her rental car at the far end of the lot and took a moment to compose herself. The barbecue was being held at a private section of beach that the team had reserved, a tradition they apparently held after every major training cycle. It was meant to be informal, a chance for the operators and their families to relax and bond outside the rigid structure of military life. For Sarah, it was reconnaissance. She needed to understand the dynamics of this team, identify the leaders and the followers, spot potential problems before they became actual problems. She walked along the wooden boardwalk toward the beach, her sandals quiet on the weathered planks. The smell of grilling meat mixed with salt air. She could see the gathering now, maybe 60 or 70 people spread across the sand. Volleyball nets were set up at one end, coolers scattered throughout, and a large grill dominated the center where several men stood with beers in hand. Tending to burgers and hot dogs, Sarah paused at the edge of the boardwalk, taking in the scene. Children ran through the shallow waves while their mothers watched from beach chairs. Groups of men clustered together, their body language speaking of shared experiences and inside jokes. A few women in their 20s flirted with some of the younger operators, drawn to the confidence and danger that seemed to radiate from these men even in casual settings. "You must be Sarah," a voice said from her left. She turned to find a man in his mid-40s approaching. His graying hair cut military short, but his clothes decidedly civilian. He had an easy smile and intelligent eyes that assessed her quickly, but not unkindly. "Commander Mitchell," she corrected gently, extending her hand. "But Sarah is fine for today." "Don Cooper, executive officer," he said, shaking her hand with a firm grip. "Welcome to the circus. I know you wanted to keep a low profile today, so I haven't told anyone who you are. As far as they know, you're a friend of mine from another command. Just visiting." Sarah nodded, grateful for his discretion. "Thank you. How are they doing?" "The team." Dan's expression grew thoughtful as he gazed out at the gathering. "They're good men, mostly. Strong operators, loyal to each other, dedicated to the mission. But I won't lie to you, they're not ready for change. Word has been circulating about the new CO, and there's been some grumbling." "About me being a woman," Sarah said. "It was not a question." "It's about you being a woman," Dan confirmed. "Some of them think it's political, that you're getting the job to check a diversity box. Others are worried you won't understand how they operate, that you'll try to change too much too fast." Sarah had expected this. She had faced similar attitudes at every stage of her career. "And what do you think?" Dan smiled. "I think they're about to get a wake-up call. I've read your file, Sarah. What you've accomplished would be impressive for anyone, regardless of gender. You've earned this command 10 times over. But earning their respect? That's going to be the real challenge." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion near the volleyball net caught their attention. A group of men were cheering as 2 players went up for a spike, the ball slamming into the sand with a satisfying thud. The winners celebrated with chest bumps and loud shouts. "That's Alpha Platoon," Dan said. "Good guys, but they can be a handful. Their lieutenant is solid, though. Name's Marcus Webb, the tall one near the net." Sarah studied the man Dan indicated. He was indeed tall, maybe 6'3", with dark skin and an athletic build. He was laughing at something one of his men had said, his whole demeanor suggesting genuine affection for his team. "And Bravo Platoon?" Sarah asked. Dan pointed toward the grill. "Over there. Their lieutenant is Jake Brennan, the redhead with the beard. Tough as nails, but fair. His men would follow him anywhere." Sarah's eyes drifted across the gathering, cataloging faces and interactions. Then she froze. Near the far cooler, she spotted 3 familiar figures. The blonde one, the stocky one, and the wiry one from the cafe. They were laughing, beers in hand, seemingly without a care in the world. "Who are those 3? She asked, keeping her voice neutral. Dan followed her gaze. "That's Travis McKay, the blonde. Ryan Foster, the big guy. And the skinny one is Derek Chen. They're all in Bravo Platoon." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Sarah said, filing away their names. Travis McKay, Ryan Foster, Derek Chen. She would not forget. Dan gave her a sideways glance but did not press the issue. "Come on, let me introduce you around. Just remember, today you're nobody special." They walked down onto the sand, and Sarah felt the familiar shift in atmosphere as people noticed her. The women smiled politely, making room in their conversations. The men assessed her with varying degrees of interest, some friendly, others wary, a few appreciative in ways that made her jaw tighten. Dan introduced her to Marcus Webb first. The Alpha Platoon commander had a firm handshake and a warm smile. "Any friend of Dan's is welcome here," he said. "You've stationed around here?" "Just passing through," Sarah replied, the cover story she and Dan had agreed on. "Thought I would stop by and see how real teams operate?" Marcus laughed. "Real teams? Where are you coming from?" "Here and there," Sarah said vaguely. "Mostly admin work lately." She could see the shift in his expression, the slight loss of interest. In the SEAL community, admin work was not respected the way operational billets were. It was exactly the impression she wanted to create, someone non-threatening, forgettable. They moved through the gathering, Dan making introductions, Sarah playing her part. She met wives and girlfriends, learned about children and deployment schedules, listened to stories about training mishaps and last-minute heroics. Everyone was friendly enough, but she remained an outsider, a temporary visitor to their tight-knit world. Then they reached the group near the cooler, and Sarah found herself face-to-face with Travis McKay. His eyes widened slightly in recognition, beer halfway to his lips. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Derek and Ryan noticed the pause and turned to look at her, their own expressions shifting from curiosity to surprise to something that might have been embarrassment. "Sarah, this is Travis McKay, Ryan Foster, and Derek Chen," Dan said, oblivious to the tension. "Guys, this is Sarah Mitchell, friend of mine from another command." Travis recovered first, his cocky grin sliding back into place. "We've actually met," he said, his tone casual. "Earlier today, right?" "That's right," Sarah said evenly. Small world. Ryan shifted his weight, not quite meeting her eyes. Derek took a long drink from his beer, studying her over the rim of his bottle. "Where did you run into each other?" Dan asked. "Just a cafe downtown," Travis said, shrugging. Briefly, Sarah noted the lie of omission, the way he downplayed their encounter. She could call him out right now, describe exactly what had happened, watch him squirm. But that would reveal who she was, and she was not ready for that yet. Very briefly she agreed, her smile not reaching her eyes. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Dan, sensing something off, changed the subject. "Travis, how's your shoulder healing up? I heard you tweaked it during the training rotation." The conversation shifted, and Sarah took the opportunity to move on, Dan following. When they were out of earshot, he turned to her with raised eyebrows. "What was that about?" "Nothing important," Sarah said. "Just a misunderstanding earlier." Don looked like he wanted to press further, but Marcus Webb called him over to help with something at the grill. He excused himself, leaving Sarah standing alone near the water's edge. She watched the waves roll in, letting the sound calm her racing thoughts. The encounter with Travis and his friends had rattled her more than she wanted to admit, not because of what they had done, but because of what it represented. These were the men she would command, and at least 3 of them had shown her complete disrespect just hours earlier. "You okay?" Sarah turned to find a woman about her age approaching, a friendly smile on her suntanned face. She wore a simple sundress and carried a sleeping toddler on her hip. "I'm fine," Sarah said. "Just enjoying the view. It's beautiful, isn't it?" the woman said. "I'm Amy Webb, Marcus's wife. Dan said you were visiting from out of town." "That's right." "Sarah Mitchell." Amy shifted the toddler to her other hip. "It's nice to meet you. Are you Navy too?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, though I've been doing mostly desk work lately." "Well, that's still important," Amy said kindly. "My husband always says the operations people get the glory, but the administrative folks keep the whole machine running." It was a diplomatic thing to say, and Sarah appreciated the effort. They chatted for a few minutes about inconsequential things: the weather, the beach, the challenges of military life. Amy was easy to talk to, genuine in a way that Sarah found refreshing after the posturing she had encountered from some of the men. As the sun continued its descent, the gathering began to shift into evening mode. Someone started a bonfire, and people gravitated toward it with fresh drinks and blankets. Children were rounded up and taken home by tired parents. The atmosphere became more relaxed, more intimate. Sarah found herself sitting near the fire, listening to stories being traded back and forth. The men talked about training exercises gone wrong, close calls during deployments, practical jokes played on unsuspecting teammates. Their camaraderie was evident in every gesture, every inside reference, every burst of laughter. She noticed that Travis, Ryan, and Derek had joined the circle, sitting directly across from her. Travis was in the middle of a story about a parachute jump, his hands gesturing wildly, his voice animated. The others listened with grins, occasionally interjecting corrections or additional details. "So there I am, at 12,000 feet, and I realize my reserve chute is tangled," Travis was saying. "I've got maybe 30 seconds to sort it out before I become a lawn dart." Meanwhile, Derek here is screaming in my ear over the radio, completely useless. "I was giving helpful advice," Derek protested. "You were panicking worse than I was," Travis shot back, and the group erupted in laughter. Sarah watched them, trying to reconcile these men with the ones who had humiliated her earlier. Here, surrounded by their brothers, they seemed different. Still cocky, still full of themselves. But there was an underlying loyalty and genuine affection in their interactions that spoke to their character as operators. It made what had happened at the cafe even more troubling. They were not bad men, necessarily. They were men who had been allowed to believe that certain behavior was acceptable, that their status as SEALs put them above common decency in certain situations. That was going to change. The conversation shifted to the upcoming training cycle. Marcus mentioned that they would be getting a new commanding officer soon, and the mood around the fire grew more subdued. "Anyone know anything about this new CO?" Jake Brennan, the Bravo platoon commander, asked. Dan, who had been quiet until now, simply shrugged. "Command hasn't given me much information. Just that the change of command ceremony is in 2 weeks. "I heard it's a woman," Ryan said, his voice carrying a note of disdain. "Some political appointee who probably never saw real action." Sarah felt every muscle in her body tense, but she kept her expression neutral, her eyes on the fire. "Where did you hear that?" Marcus asked. "A friend of mine at headquarters," Ryan replied. "He said it's all part of the Navy's diversity push. They need a female SEAL commander for the optics." "That's bull," Marcus said firmly. "The Navy doesn't hand out SEAL team commands based on optics. Whoever is coming earned that position." "Maybe," Travis said, taking a drink from his beer. "But face it, a woman leading SEALs? How's that supposed to work? She won't understand us, won't know what we go through." "Why not?" Amy's voice cut through the conversation. She had returned from putting her child in the car and now stood behind Marcus, her arms crossed. "Women have been in combat roles for years now. Some have even completed SEAL training. Completing training is different from leading, Derek argued. The team dynamic is important. We need someone who gets it, who's been there. You think a woman can't get it? Amy challenged. The men shifted uncomfortably. Sarah could see them trying to navigate the conversation without offending Amy while still expressing their doubts. It's not about capability, Jake said carefully. It's about cohesion. We're a brotherhood. That means something. Brotherhoods change, Dan said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Times change. The military changes. 40 years ago, people said the same things about integrating different races. 20 years ago, they said it about women in combat. The SEALs adapt, or they become irrelevant.
Travis snorted.
Come on, Dan, you can't seriously think having a female CO is going to work out. I think Dan said, his voice hardening slightly, that you should wait to meet your new commanding officer before making judgments. The rebuke was gentle but clear. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Sarah used the moment to stand, brushing sand from her legs. I should get going, she announced. Early morning tomorrow. Dan stood as well. I'll walk you to your car. They left the gathering behind, the sounds of conversation and laughter fading as they climbed back up to the parking lot. When they were far enough away, Dan turned to her. You okay? He asked. I'm fine, Sarah said. It's about what I expected. They're scared, Dan said. Not that they would admit it. But change is frightening, especially change that challenges their identity as operators. Sarah unlocked her car. In 2 weeks, their fear becomes my problem to solve.
Ow!
You have a plan. She smiled, thinking of Travis and his friends. I'm working on one. The 2 weeks between the barbecue and the change of command. Ceremony passed quickly for Sarah. She spent her days in endless meetings at headquarters, reviewing operational reports, budget documents, and personnel files. Each evening, she returned to her temporary quarters and studied the faces and records of the men she would soon lead. Travis McKay, 28 years old, 5 years with the teams, excellent marksman, strong swimmer, solid under pressure. 3 deployments, multiple commendations. His evaluations praised his technical skills but noted occasional discipline issues. Nothing serious enough to derail his career, but present nonetheless. Ryan Foster, 31, 7 years with the teams. Heavy weapons specialist, known for his physical strength and endurance, for deployments. His file showed a similar pattern to Travis, capable operator with minor behavioral complaints that had been overlooked or dismissed. Derek Chen, 26, for years with the teams. Communications expert, fluent in Mandarin and Arabic. 2 deployments. His record was cleaner than the others, but his most recent evaluation mentioned a need to work on professional bearing when dealing with non-SEAL. Personnel. Sarah memorized every detail. Not just of these 3, but of all 72 men under her command. She studied their strengths and weaknesses, their relationships and rivalries, their deployments, and their families. Knowledge was power, and she intended to walk into that change of command ceremony with more information than anyone. Expected. Don checked in with her regularly, offering insights into team dynamics that the files could not capture. He told her about Marcus's steady leadership style, about Jake's tendency to push his men harder than necessary, about the ongoing friendly rivalry between Alpha and Bravo platoons. He mentioned concerns about equipment maintenance, about training schedules that needed adjustment, about administrative issues that had been allowed to slide under the previous commander. Commander Hayes was a good leader, Dan explained during one of their coffee meetings, but he was old school, very hands-off. He trusted his officers to handle their platoons and stayed focused on the big picture. It worked for him, but it also meant some things fell through the cracks. Like accountability, Sarah observed. Don nodded. Like accountability. On the morning of the change of command ceremony, Sarah woke before dawn. She went for a 10-mile run along the beach, pushing herself hard, letting the physical exertion clear her mind. By the time she returned to her quarters, the sun was rising over the ocean. Painting the water in shades of pink and gold, she showered and dressed carefully in her service uniform. The Navy's formal dress whites, The uniform was crisp and perfect, her shoes polished to a mirror shine, her hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She studied herself in the mirror, noting the sealed trident on her chest, the rows of ribbons that told the story of her service, the rank insignia that marked her as a commander. This was the moment she had worked toward for 15 years. Every brutal training session, every deployment to hostile territories, every time she had proven herself against men who doubted her, it had all led here. To this command, to this team, to this chance to make a real difference. The ceremony was scheduled for 1,000 hours at the Naval Amphibious Base. Sarah arrived 30 minutes early. Walking through the base with Dan at her side, sailors saluted as they passed, and she returned each salute crisply. "Nervous?" Dan asked. "Focused," Sarah corrected. The ceremony was being held outdoors on a parade ground, with rows of white chairs arranged in neat formation. A podium stood at the front, flanked by the American flag and the Navy flag. Behind it, 72 men stood in perfect ranks, their dress uniforms identical, their bearing military precise. Sarah's eyes swept across them, and she found Travis, Ryan, and Derek standing together in the third row. Their faces were neutral, revealing nothing, but she could read the tension in their shoulders, the way they held themselves just a little too rigidly. The base commander arrived, a Navy captain with 30 years of service. Other dignitaries followed, taking their seats in the front row. Family members and friends filled the remaining chairs, and Sarah spotted Amy Webb among them, holding her toddler and smiling encouragingly when she caught Sarah's eye. The ceremony began with the presentation of colors, followed by the national anthem. Then the base commander stepped to the podium, his voice carrying clearly across the parade ground. "We are gathered here today to witness the change of command of SEAL Team 7, he began. "This is a solemn occasion, a transfer of authority and responsibility from one leader to another, a continuation of the proud traditions that have defined naval special warfare for decades." He spoke about Commander Hayes, praising his leadership and thanking him for his service. Hayes stepped forward to accept recognition, his weathered face showing both pride and relief. He was heading to a teaching position at the Naval Academy, a well-earned reward for a distinguished career. Then the captain turned his attention to Sarah. "It is my great honor to introduce Commander Sarah Mitchell, who will assume command of SEAL Team 7 today. Commander Mitchell brings an impressive operational background and a proven track record of leadership in some of the most challenging environments our nation has faced." He went on to list her qualifications, her deployments, her awards. Sarah stood at attention, her face impassive, but she could feel the weight of 72 pairs of eyes studying her, evaluating her, judging her. Commander Mitchell completed basic underwater demolition SEAL training in 2018, the second woman ever to do so. She served with distinction in multiple special operations units before being selected for this command. Her combat record speaks for itself, with 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, and a Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism during a hostage rescue operation in Afghanistan. Sarah saw the subtle shift in the ranks before her, shoulders straightening, heads tilting slightly. The Navy Cross was the second highest military decoration, awarded only for extreme valor in combat. These men knew what it meant to earn one. The ceremony continued with the reading of orders, the formal transfer of the unit colors from Hayes to Sarah. She accepted the flag, feeling its weight in her hands, symbolic of the responsibility she was accepting. Then it was her turn to speak. Sarah stepped to the podium, setting her cover aside, looking out at the assembled team. She had spent days working on this speech, refining it, practicing it. But now, standing here, she set aside her prepared remarks and spoke from the heart. "Commander Hayes, thank you for your leadership and for the example you have set. Captain, thank you for your confidence in entrusting me with this command. And to the men of SEAL Team 7, thank you for your service and your dedication." She paused, letting her eyes sweep across the ranks. "I know what you're thinking. Some of you are wondering if I understand what it means to be a SEAL. Others are questioning whether a woman can lead this team effectively. A few of you have already decided I'm here because of politics rather than merit. The honesty of her words caused a ripple of reaction, quickly suppressed. But she had their attention now, complete and total. I'm not going to stand here and give you platitudes about teamwork and tradition. You've heard all that before. Instead, I'm going to tell you what I expect. I expect professionalism, both in the field and out of it. I expect accountability from the newest operator to the most senior officer. I expect excellence in everything we do, because lives depend on our ability to execute our mission flawlessly. Sarah's voice hardened slightly. I also expect respect. Respect for your teammates. Respect for your leaders. Respect for the uniform you wear. And respect for every person you encounter, regardless of their rank or position or gender. The SEAL community is elite because of our capabilities, not because we think we're above basic human decency. She could see the impact of her words, particularly on certain faces in the formation. Travis had gone very still, his jaw clenched. Ryan was staring straight ahead, his neck flushed red. Derek's eyes had widened slightly. I've read all of your files, Sarah continued. I know your strengths and your weaknesses. I know which of you are natural leaders and which of you struggle with authority. I know about your deployments, your families, your concerns about this change of command. She leaned forward slightly, her voice carrying authority that brooked no argument. Here's what you need to know about me. I earned my trident the same way you did, through blood, sweat, and more pain than I care to remember. I've operated in hostile territories across 3 continents. I've made hard decisions under fire and lived with the consequences, and I have absolutely zero tolerance for behavior that undermines this team or the values we're supposed to represent. The parade ground was silent, except for the distant sound of waves and the cry of seagulls. Every person present was hanging on her words. Starting today, things are going to change. Not because I'm a woman, but because change is necessary for us to maintain our edge. We're going to review our training protocols, update our equipment standards, and address some administrative issues that have been neglected. We're also going to have conversations about professionalism and what it means to be part of an elite unit in the modern military. Sarah straightened, her expression softening slightly. But I want you to know this as well. I'm proud to command this team. You are among the finest warriors our nation has to offer. Your dedication, your sacrifice, your willingness to go into harm's way in defense of others, that deserves respect and recognition. My job is to make you even better, to give you the tools and leadership you need to accomplish your mission and come home safely. She picked up her cover, setting it back on her head. I'm not asking you to like me. I'm not asking you to agree with every decision I make, but I am requiring you to follow orders, maintain standards, and conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the SEAL trident you wear. Do that, and we're going to accomplish great things together. Fail to do that, and you'll answer to me. Are we clear? The response came back in unison, sharp and military precise. Yes, ma'am. Outstanding, Sarah said. I look forward to serving with all of you. Dismissed. The formation held for a moment, then broke as people moved toward the reception area where refreshments had been set up. Sarah was immediately surrounded by well-wishers. Officers from other commands offering congratulations, civilians thanking her for her service. Through the crowd, she watched Travis, Ryan, and Derek. They stood together slightly apart from the others, deep in conversation. She could not hear what they were saying, but their body language spoke volumes. Confusion, worry, and perhaps the first hints of realization. Dawn appeared at her elbow. That was quite a speech. You definitely got their attention. That was the point, Sarah said. What's your next move? Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Now we see who is paying attention. The reception lasted another hour, with Sarah making small talk and accepting congratulations, while her mind was already moving ahead to the real work. When it finally ended, and the parade ground cleared, she asked Dan to assemble the team's officers in the conference room. Marcus and Jake arrived first, both still in their dress uniforms. They were followed by the other platoon leaders and senior enlisted personnel. Travis, Ryan, and Derek were not present, which Sarah had expected. They were enlisted operators, not part of the command structure, but they would be soon enough. Sarah stood at the head of the conference table, waiting until everyone was seated. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming. I wanted to meet with you separately to discuss some immediate priorities." She pulled up a presentation on the room's screen showing a detailed breakdown of team readiness metrics. "As you can see, our equipment maintenance rates have dropped below acceptable standards. Our qualification scores are solid but not exceptional, and we have a troubling pattern of minor disciplinary issues that have been addressed with counseling but no real consequences." Marcus shifted in his seat. "With respect, ma'am, those minor issues are just part of managing strong personalities. The men blow off steam, we correct them, everyone moves on." "Define blow off steam," Sarah said. "Bar fights, usually," Jake admitted. "Maybe some property damage. We handle it internally, make sure it doesn't escalate." "And how often does this happen?" The officers exchanged glances. "Maybe once or twice a month," Marcus said finally. Sarah let that sink in. Once or twice a month meant 12 to 24 incidents per year, incidents that were being swept under the rug rather than properly addressed. "That ends now," she said. "I'm not saying we need to throw the book at every operator who has a bad night, but we need accountability. Real accountability with real consequences." She advanced the presentation to the next slide. "I'm also implementing mandatory training on professional conduct. Not just the standard military training everyone sleeps through, but practical scenarios based on real incidents. We're going to talk about what it means to represent the SEAL community, both in uniform and out of it." "The men aren't going to like that," Jake warned. "I don't need them to like it," Sarah replied. "I need them to understand it." She looked around the table, meeting each officer's eyes in turn. "I know some of you have concerns about my leadership. That's fine. Judge me based on my actions and decisions, not on assumptions. But understand this. I will hold you accountable for your platoons. And I expect you to hold your men accountable for their behavior. The free pass era is over." The meeting continued for another hour, with Sarah outlining her vision for the team's future. By the time it ended, she could see both respect and apprehension in the officers' faces. They were professional enough to understand the necessity of what she was proposing, even if they worried about implementation. As everyone filed out, Marcus lingered behind. "Commander, can I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course." He waited until they were alone, then said carefully, "I owe you an apology. At the barbecue, when we discussed the new CO, I should have shut down that conversation more firmly. Some of what was said was inappropriate." Sarah appreciated the gesture. "You defended the position without knowing who would fill it. That shows good leadership. Still, I could have done better." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, that speech you gave today changed some minds. The Navy Cross especially. The men respect combat leadership above everything else. Respect earned through action is the only kind that matters," Sarah said. Marcus nodded and left, leaving Sarah alone in the conference room. She walked to the window, looking out at the base, at the ocean beyond. Her command had officially begun, and the easy part was over. Now came the real test. Sarah's first week as commanding officer was a carefully orchestrated campaign of observation and assessment. She attended morning physical training with the team, running alongside them at 5 in the morning, matching their pace despite the looks of surprise when she first appeared in workout clothes. She sat in on training briefs, asking pointed questions that revealed both her knowledge and her attention to detail. She walked through the equipment rooms, noting what was properly maintained and what had been neglected. The men watched her constantly, testing her, waiting for her to make a mistake or show weakness. Sarah had expected this. She had lived it before, during SEAL training, during her first operational assignment, during every step of her career. The difference now was that she held the authority. She intended to use it. On Thursday afternoon of her first week, she called a team-wide meeting in the briefing room. All 72 operators packed into the space, filling the rows of seats, leaning against walls where seating ran out. The room smelled of sweat and coffee, fluorescent lights harsh overhead. Sarah stood at the front, waiting for the conversations to die down. When she had everyone's attention, she began without preamble. "Tomorrow morning at 0600, we're conducting a comprehensive equipment inspection. Every piece of gear you're responsible for, from your primary weapon to your medical supplies, will be laid out for evaluation. Items that don't meet standards will be replaced immediately. And those responsible will explain why their equipment was deficient. A murmur ran through the room. Comprehensive inspections were typically annual events, not something sprung on the team with less than 24 hours' notice. Additionally, Sarah continued, we're implementing a new physical fitness assessment protocol. Starting next week, all operators will complete a monthly PT test that includes swimming, running, calisthenics, and an obstacle course. Minimum scores are non-negotiable. Those who fail will be placed on remedial training until they meet standards. The murmurs grew louder. Jake raised his hand. Ma'am, we already maintain high fitness levels. Is this really necessary? When was the last comprehensive PT test? Sarah asked. Jake hesitated. 6 months ago? And before that? Maybe a year, Sarah nodded. That's not good enough. Physical readiness is fundamental to what we do. We test it monthly, or we risk letting standards slip. She advanced her presentation to reveal a chart showing the team's current qualification scores. These are your shooting scores from last quarter. They're acceptable, but barely. I expect better. We're increasing range time by 20% and implementing competitive shoots between platoons. Top performers get recognition. Bottom performers get extra training. Travis spoke up from the back of the room. With respect, ma'am, we're combat veterans, not academy recruits. We know how to shoot. Sarah's eyes found him in the crowd. Is that Travis McKay? Pause. Yes, ma'am. Petty Officer McKay, you're absolutely right. You are combat veterans, which is why I expect you to perform at a higher level than academy recruits. Your qualification scores should reflect that expertise. Do they? Travis's face reddened, but he answered steadily. They could be better, ma'am. They'll make them better, Sarah said. Any other questions? Ryan raised his hand. What about deployment schedules? Are those changing? We're due to rotate overseas in 3 months, Sarah said. That timeline remains unchanged. But we're going to use these 3 months to ensure everyone is prepared to operate at peak effectiveness. That means addressing the equipment issues, the fitness issues, and the training gaps I've identified in the last week. She paused, letting her words sink in. I know this seems like a lot of change happening quickly, but understand that every adjustment I'm making is based on objective assessment of where we are versus where we need to be. My goal is not to make your lives harder. My goal is to ensure that when we deploy, every person in this room comes home alive. The room fell silent. It was impossible to argue with that objective, even if they disagreed with her methods. Dismissed, Sarah said. I'll see you all at 0600 for inspection. The men filed out, their conversations resuming the moment they cleared the doorway. Sarah gathered her materials, aware of Dan approaching. You're pushing hard, he observed. I'm establishing standards, Sarah corrected. There's a difference. The men don't see it that way. They see a new CO making sweeping changes without consulting them or understanding how things have been done. Sarah fixed him with a level stare. How things have been done is why we have the problems I'm fixing. If I spend 6 months building consensus before making necessary changes, we deploy with the same deficiencies we have now. I won't risk lives for the sake of making people comfortable. Don raised his hands in a placating gesture. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just giving you a read on the room. Some of the guys are getting restless. Then they're welcome to come talk to me about it, Sarah said. My door is always open. But no one came to her door that afternoon or evening. Instead, the grumbling happened in private, in the barracks, in the parking lot, in text messages, and phone calls. Sarah knew this because Marcus told her, his expression troubled when he stopped by her office just before she left for the day. There's some talk, he said carefully. About filing complaints? What kind of complaints? Hostile work environment, creating unnecessary stress. The usual things people say when they don't like new leadership. Sarah had anticipated this too. Let them file. Every change I've made is within regulation and based on legitimate operational concerns. If someone wants to go on record complaining about being held to standards, that's their choice. Marcus nodded slowly. You're not worried? I'm concerned about doing my job effectively, Sarah said. If that means some people are uncomfortable, so be it. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. The men in your platoon respect you. If you support these changes, they'll come around. If you undermine them, even subtly, it gives them permission to resist. I'm not trying to undermine you, Marcus said, looking offended. I know. But silence can be interpreted as disagreement. I need you to actively support what we're doing, especially in those private conversations where you think I'm not paying attention. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Understood. And for what it's worth, I think you're right about the standards. We've gotten complacent. Thank you, Sarah said, meaning it. The equipment inspection the next morning was revealing in ways Sarah had expected, and some she had not. Most of the gear was well maintained, showing the discipline and attention to detail that defined professional operators. But there were troubling exceptions. Travis McKay's primary weapon had a scope that was improperly zeroed, something that should have been caught and corrected immediately. When Sarah questioned him about it, he admitted he had been meaning to fix it but had not gotten around to it. How long has it been off? Sarah asked. Maybe 2 weeks, Travis said, not meeting her eyes. 2 weeks? And in that time, you qualified with this weapon? How many times? Twice, ma'am. Sarah felt cold anger settling in her gut. So you qualified with a weapon you knew was not properly zeroed, and you didn't report the problem. What if we had received an emergency deployment order? What if you needed to take a shot that required precision, and you missed because your equipment was faulty? Travis had no answer. Around them, the rest of the team watched in silence. Report to the armory after inspection, Sarah ordered. You'll spend the rest of the day zeroing every weapon in your kit. You'll have them rechecked by the armorer before you leave. Additionally, you're on equipment maintenance duty for the next month. Every evening, you'll inspect and service gear for your entire platoon. Maybe that will help you remember why this matters. Yes, ma'am, Travis said stiffly. The inspection continued, and Sarah found 2 more significant issues. Ryan Foster's medical kit was missing key supplies, including combat gauze and a tourniquet. His excuse was that he had used them during training and had not restocked yet. When was this training? Sarah demanded. 3 weeks ago, ma'am. 3 weeks without a complete medical kit. Sarah's jaw tightened. You understand that your medical supplies might be the difference between a teammate living or dying from a wound, correct? Yes, ma'am. Then explain to me why you've been operating for 3 weeks without ensuring your kit was complete. Ryan shifted his weight. Clearly uncomfortable under her scrutiny and the stares of his teammates. No excuse, ma'am. No, there isn't, Sarah agreed. You're joining Petty Officer McKay on equipment maintenance duty. Maybe between the 2 of you, you'll figure out that attention to detail isn't optional. By the time the inspection ended, Sarah had identified 8 operators with deficient equipment and had assigned corrective action to each. The message was clear. Standards applied to everyone, and excuses would not be tolerated. That afternoon, while Travis and Ryan were working in the equipment bay, Sarah made a point of stopping by. They both straightened when they saw her, their hands pausing in their work. As you were, Sarah said, moving to examine the weapons Travis had been zeroing. She picked up his rifle, sighting through the scope, testing the adjustments. Better. How many rounds did you fire to get it right? About 60, ma'am, Travis said. That's a lot of rounds for a simple zeroing. You should be able to do this in 20 or less. Yes, ma'am. I'm out of practice. Sarah set the weapon down and turned to face both men. The equipment bay was relatively private, and she had deliberately chosen this moment for what needed to be said. I think we need to have a conversation about what happened 3 weeks ago, she said quietly. Both men went very still. Derek, who had been working nearby, froze as well. Ma'am, Travis said carefully. The cafe downtown. The afternoon before the team barbecue. Ring any bells? The color drained from Travis's face. Beside him, Ryan looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Derek moved closer, his expression wary. I was trying to decide how to handle that incident, Sarah continued, her voice conversational, but her eyes hard. I could have reported it immediately, filed formal complaints for assault and conduct unbecoming. I could have brought it up during the change of command ceremony, made an example of you in front of the entire team. I could have had you transferred to other units, or even brought up on charges. She paused, letting the weight of those possibilities settle over them. Instead, I decided to wait. I wanted to see who you were as operators, whether the behavior I witnessed was an aberration or a pattern. This week has given me some answers. Ma'am, Ryan started, but Sarah cut him off with a raised hand. I'm not finished. What you did was unacceptable. Not because you did it to your commanding officer, though. That's certainly relevant now. It was unacceptable because you did it to another human being. You humiliated someone you perceived as weaker or less important than you, and you did it for entertainment. That shows a fundamental lack of character and judgment. Travis found his voice. We had no idea who you were. That's exactly my point, Sarah said sharply. You should treat everyone with respect, regardless of who they are. The uniform you wear represents values, honor, courage, and commitment. What you did that day betrayed every one of those values. She moved closer, her voice dropping but losing none of its intensity. Here's what's going to happen. You three are going to complete the equipment maintenance duty one assigned. You're also going to write detailed accounts of what happened at that cafe and what you've learned from it. Those accounts will go in my files, insurance, in case I ever need to revisit this incident. And then, Derek asked, speaking for the first time, and then you're going to prove to me that you're better than your worst moment. You're going to be model operators, leaders in your platoon, examples of the professionalism I expect from this team. You're going to make me glad I gave you a second chance instead of destroying your careers when I had every justification to do so? Sarah stepped back, her expression softening slightly. I believe people can change and learn from their mistakes. I also believe that everyone in this room is capable of excellence when they choose to pursue it. The question is whether you'll make that choice or whether you'll prove my faith in you was misplaced. The three men stood speechless, processing what had just happened. They had been caught, called out, and somehow offered redemption all at once. I don't want to hear apologies, Sarah said. I want to see changed behavior. I want to see you treating every person you encounter with the respect they deserve. I want to see you living up to the standards that the SEAL community is built on. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am, they said in unison, and for the first time since she had met them. Sarah heard genuine humility in their voices. Good, then get back to work. And gentlemen, don't make me regret this decision. She left them there, her heart pounding with the adrenaline of confrontation. It had been a calculated risk, addressing the incident directly rather than through official channels. But sometimes, real leadership meant taking risks. Meeting people where they were, and believing they could rise to higher expectations. Time would tell if she had made the right choice. That evening, as Sarah was leaving the building, she found Amy Webb waiting in the parking lot. Marcus's wife smiled and waved her over. I hope I'm not intruding, Amy said. I just wanted to say that what you're doing here matters. Marcus came home yesterday and spent an hour talking about the changes you're making. He's excited about them, even if he's worried about how the men will react. Change is never easy, Sarah said. No, but it's necessary. And between you and me, this team has needed a shake-up for a while. The old commander was a good man, but he let too many things slide. You're exactly what they need. Sarah appreciated the support more than she could express. Thank you. That means a lot. Amy hesitated, then added, there's something else. At the barbecue, when we were talking about the new CO, I saw how you reacted. And I've heard some rumors about an incident at a cafe. I don't know if they're connected, but if they are, I'm sorry. The men can be idiots sometimes, especially when they forget that SEAL doesn't give them license to be jerks. Sarah smiled despite herself. They're learning that lesson now, good, Amy said firmly. They should. And for what it's worth, I think you're going to be an amazing commander. Give them hell, Sarah. As Sarah drove home that night, she reflected on the week that had passed. She had established authority, set standards, confronted problems directly, and begun the hard work of changing a culture that had grown too comfortable with its own flaws. There would be more challenges ahead, more resistance. More moments where she questioned whether she was pushing too hard or not hard enough. But tonight, for the first time since taking command, Sarah felt confident that she was on the right path. The real work was just beginning. 6 weeks into her command, Sarah had transformed SEAL Team 7 in ways that were both visible and subtle. The equipment was maintained to higher standards. The physical fitness scores had improved across the board, and the training regimen had intensified in focused, purposeful ways. But more important than these measurable changes was the shift in culture that was slowly taking root. Travis, K, had become one of the most meticulous operators on the team. His gear was always inspection-ready, his attention to detail bordering on obsessive. During training exercises, he volunteered to help newer team members with equipment maintenance, sharing the lessons he had learned the hard way. Ryan Foster had earned a reputation for being the first to arrive and the last to leave, his work ethic speaking louder than any words. Derek Chen had become known for his patient mentorship of junior communicators, building their skills with genuine care. The three men had submitted their written accounts of the cafe incident, and Sarah had read them carefully. Each essay showed real reflection, genuine understanding of what they had done wrong, and commitment to being better. She had filed the papers away, hoping she would never need to reference them again, but not everyone had embraced the changes. There was still resistance, subtle and sometimes not so subtle. Comments made just loud enough for her to overhear about female commanders and political correctness. Rolled eyes during briefings when she announced new protocols. The occasional forgotten task that required her direct intervention to complete. Sarah handled each instance with consistency, addressing problems immediately and proportionally. Minor infractions earned verbal corrections. Repeated issues resulted in formal counseling. She was fair but uncompromising. And slowly, the resistance began to fade as operators realized she was not going anywhere and her standards were not negotiable. Then came the training. Exercise that would test everything Sarah had built. It was a full mission rehearsal, as close to real combat conditions as training allowed. The scenario involved a hostage rescue in a simulated urban environment, the role players acting as hostages and hostile forces. The team would have 6 hours to plan, then execute the mission under evaluation by Sarah and a group of senior SOCers from Naval Special Warfare Command. This was Sarah's first major test as commanding officer, and everyone knew it. Success would validate her leadership and the changes she had implemented. Failure would be ammunition for those who still doubted her. The planning session began at 0600 in the team briefing room. Marcus and Jake stood at the front with their respective platoon sergeants, ready to present their approach. The rest of the team filled the room, notepads out, focused and professional. Sarah sat in the back, observing. This was their show to run. She would intervene only if necessary. Marcus outlined the approach using a detailed 3D model of the target building. We insert here via helicopter fast rope to the roof. Alpha platoon secures the upper floors while Bravo comes in through the ground level. Time from insertion to hostage location is estimated at 4 minutes. Jake added his piece, detailing Bravo's role. We breach here and here, clearing rooms as we advance. Once we reach the hostage location, we hold security while Alpha extracts them via the roof. It was a solid plan, textbook special operations tactics. But Sarah saw the flaw immediately. The timing was too tight, the coordination too dependent on everything going perfectly. In real operations, nothing ever went perfectly. She waited to see if anyone else would notice. Travis raised his hand. What if the helicopter insertion is delayed? Whether mechanical issues, whatever. Do we have a backup plan? Marcus nodded approvingly. Good catch. Backup is ground insertion through the east entrance. It adds 3 minutes to our timeline, but it's more reliable. Sarah made a note. Travis was thinking like a leader, asking the hard questions. Good. The planning continued for another hour with the team refining details and running through contingencies. When they were done, Marcus looked back at Sarah. Commander, any input? She stood and walked to the front, studying the 3D model. Talk me through your communications plan. How do the 2 platoons stay coordinated once you're inside? Jake pointed to their diagram. Each team has a designated communicator maintaining contact. If we lose comms, we fall back to visual signals and stick to the timeline. And if the hostages are not where you expect them to be, the room went quiet. This was the scenario commanders dreaded, the thing that turned routine operations into disasters. Marcus answered carefully. We conduct a rapid search of adjacent rooms, but we don't deviate from the primary route. Too much risk of teams running into each other in hostile space? Sarah nodded. That's the doctrine answer. Now tell me what you would really do. Marcus smiled slightly. I'd send Derek and his team to check the basement while we clear the upper floors. Basements are where they usually move hostages when they know we're coming. Why didn't that make it into your plan? Because it splits our forces and increases risk. It also increases your chance of mission success, Sarah pointed out. Everything in combat is a risk calculation. Your job is to choose risks that favor the mission while protecting your people. Derek, can your team handle basement clearance independently? Derek stood. Yes, ma'am. We've done it before. Then add it to the plan. Marcus, Jake, work with Derek to coordinate timing. If the hostages are moved, we need to be positioned to respond quickly. The planning resumed with new energy, the team adapting their approach based on Sarah's input. She watched them work, pleased to see how they integrated her suggestions without resentment or defensiveness. They were learning to trust her tactical judgment. At noon, they broke for lunch. Sarah was eating a sandwich in her office when Dan knocked and entered. Admiral Crawford is here, he said. He wanted to observe the afternoon exercise. Sarah's stomach dropped. Admiral Crawford was the commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, the highest-ranking SEAL in the Navy. His presence meant this evaluation had just become exponentially more important. Where is he now? Conference room with the other observers. He asked to speak with you before the exercise begins. Sarah put down her sandwich, straightened her uniform, and followed Dan. Admiral Crawford was a legend in the SEAL community. A combat veteran with a reputation for demanding excellence and suffering no fools. He was in his late 50s, his hair more gray than black. But his posture and bearing still projected the strength of a much younger man. Commander Mitchell, he said, standing when she entered. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp and assessing. I've been hearing interesting things about your command here. I hope mostly positive things, sir. Depends on who I ask, Crawford said with a slight smile. Some people tell me you're exactly what this team needed. Others suggest you're making unnecessary changes that alienate the men. I'm here to see for myself. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I welcome your evaluation, sir. I'm confident in what we've built here. Good. Confidence is important in command. So is humility. Let's see if you've got the right balance. The exercise began at 1300 hours. Sarah and the observers watched from a monitoring station with multiple video feeds, showing different angles of the simulated target building. The team assembled at the insertion point, their movements crisp and coordinated. The helicopter insertion went smoothly, with Alpha Platoon fast-roping to the roof in under 30 seconds. Bravo Platoon moved in through the ground entrance simultaneously, reaching doors with controlled explosions that shook the building but caused no real damage. Sarah watched the feeds intently, listening to the radio chatter between teams. Marcus's voice was calm, issuing orders with authority. Jake's team moved through the lower floors with precision, clearing rooms efficiently. Derek's small team split off toward the basement entrance, moving independently but maintaining communication. Then the first complication hit. A role player acting as a hostile had hidden in a location the team had not anticipated. He shot 2 of Jake's operators with marking rounds, taking them out of the exercise. Bravo taking casualties, Jake reported. 2 men down. Sarah watched to see how they would adapt. Jake immediately reorganized his remaining team, adjusting their formation to maintain security despite reduced numbers. Good leadership under pressure. The second complication was worse. When Alpha Platoon reached the expected hostage location on the second floor, the room was empty. The hostages had been moved. Alpha at primary location, no hostages present, Marcus reported, his voice tight. Sarah leaned forward, watching how the teams would respond. This was the scenario they had discussed during planning. But executing it under pressure was different from talking about it in a conference room. "Derek, check basement," Marcus ordered. "Already on it," Derek replied. His team descended the stairs rapidly, their weapons up, moving with controlled aggression. The basement was a maze of rooms and corridors, perfect for ambushes. Admiral Crawford made a note on his tablet. Sarah resisted the urge to look at what he was writing. Derek's team found the hostages in a locked room at the far end of the basement, guarded by 3 role players. The firefight was brief and intense, with Derek's team neutralizing the guards and securing the hostages in under 40 seconds. "Hostages secured, moving to extract," Derek reported. But extraction was going to be complicated. They were in a basement with limited exits, and Marcus's Alpha platoon was 2 floors above them. The original plan had assumed the hostages would be extracted via the roof, not carried up from underground. Sarah watched Marcus process the situation. She could almost see his mind working through options. He had to get his platoon down to support the extraction while maintaining security. And he had to do it without running into Jake's reduced team that was still clearing the ground floor. "Alpha moving to support basement extraction," Marcus announced. "Jake, we're coming down the west stairwell. Need you to secure our exit route?" "Copy that," Jake replied. "Bravo moving to west exit." The coordination was beautiful to watch. Despite the complications, despite the casualties and moved hostages, the team adapted seamlessly. Within 6 minutes of locating the hostages, they had extracted them to safety and consolidated at the rally point. The exercise ended with a blast from an air horn. The team stood down, removing their safety gear and gathering for the after-action review. Admiral Crawford stood, his expression unreadable. "Shall we debrief, Commander?" Sarah led the observers down to where the team had assembled. The operators were sweaty and tired, adrenaline still evident in their movements. When they saw Admiral Crawford, they immediately straightened, recognizing his rank. "At ease," Crawford said. "That was good work out there. I saw some excellent adaptation under pressure, solid communication, and effective leadership at multiple levels." He turned to Marcus. "Lieutenant Webb, talk me through your decision to send a team to the basement before you confirmed the hostages were there." Marcus glanced at Sarah, then answered, "Sir, it was a calculated risk based on enemy behavior patterns. Moving hostages to basements is common when they suspect a raid. Commander Mitchell suggested we incorporate that possibility into our planning." Crawford's eyebrow raised slightly. He looked at Sarah. "Did you order him to do this?" "No, sir," Sarah replied. "I asked questions during planning that led them to identify the gap in their approach. The solution was theirs," Good Crawford said. "The best commanders develop their people's ability to think, not just follow orders." He addressed the full team now. "I also noticed that when casualties occurred, Lieutenant Brennan adapted his formation immediately, without requesting permission. That shows confidence and initiative." Jake nodded. "Thank you, sir." "Eric Chen," Crawford continued, and Derek stepped forward slightly. "Your basement clearance was textbook. Fast, controlled, no hesitation. Who trained you?" "Multiple instructors, sir. But Commander Mitchell has been working with me personally on decision-making in confined spaces." Crawford made another note. Then he turned to Travis. "Petty Officer McKay, I saw you covering your sector during the extraction while also assisting with hostage handling. That kind of multitasking under stress is what separates good operators from great ones." Travis looked surprised but pleased. "Thank you, sir." The debriefing continued for another 30 minutes, with Crawford providing detailed feedback on what went well and what needed improvement. His assessment was fair and thorough, praising successes while pointing out areas for growth. Finally, he turned to Sarah. "Commander Mitchell, overall evaluation of your team's performance." Sarah chose her words carefully. "Sir, the team performed well within the constraints of the scenario. They showed adaptability, solid tactical fundamentals, and good leadership at every level. Areas for improvement include communication clarity during chaos and faster decision-making when primary plans fail. We'll address both in future training cycles." Crawford nodded. "Concur with your assessment. This team is in good hands, gentlemen. Your commander knows her business and she's making you better. Listen to her. Trust the process, and you'll be ready for whatever comes next. He shook hands with the platoon leaders, acknowledged the rest of the team with a nod, then gestured for Sarah to follow him. They walked away from the group, toward his vehicle. "You've made impressive progress in 6 weeks," Crawford said. "When I assigned you to this command, there were people who questioned whether a woman could lead SEALs effectively. You're proving them wrong. I'm just doing my job, sir." "No, you're doing more than that. You're changing a culture that desperately needed changing. These men are learning that excellence and respect are not mutually exclusive. That discipline and adaptation can coexist. That leadership comes in many forms." He paused at his car, turning to face her directly. "But you need to be aware that your success here is making some people uncomfortable. There are officers in the community who see what you're doing as a threat to tradition. They're going to look for ways to undermine you." "I can handle criticism, sir." "I know you can. But be smart about it. Document everything, maintain your standards, and don't give them any ammunition. Your success is important, not just for you, but for every woman who comes after you in this community." Sarah felt the weight of that responsibility settle on her shoulders. "I understand, sir. Good. Now go celebrate with your team. They earned it, and so did you." As Crawford drove away, Sarah walked back to where the team was still gathered. They were laughing about the exercise, replaying moments, giving each other a hard time about mistakes. When they saw her approaching, the tone shifted slightly, became more formal. "As you were," Sarah said. "You all did excellent work today. I'm proud of how you performed, especially how you handled the complications. That's exactly the kind of adaptability we need in real operations." She looked at Travis, Ryan, and Derek specifically. "You three in particular showed real growth today. Keep it up." The 3 men nodded, and Sarah saw something in their eyes that had not been there before. Respect, real respect, earned through competence and consistent leadership. "We've got a barbecue scheduled for tomorrow evening," Sarah continued. "It's optional, but encouraged. Bring your families if you want. We've earned a chance to relax and celebrate as a team." As the group dispersed, Marcus approached her. That was intense. "Admiral Crawford doesn't praise lightly." "No, he doesn't," Sarah agreed. "But his visit was also a test. He wanted to see if I could perform under scrutiny. And," Sarah smiled, "I think we passed." We all did. That evening, alone in her quarters, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. 6 weeks ago, she had inherited a team with good operators, but inconsistent standards and a culture that needed reform. Today, they had performed at a level that impressed one of the most respected leaders in naval special warfare. But Crawford's warning lingered in her mind. Success would bring scrutiny and opposition from those who saw her as a threat to traditional ways. She needed to be vigilant, careful, and relentless in maintaining the standards she had set. The fight was far from over. But today had been a victory. Sarah would take it. 3 months had passed since Sarah took command of SEAL Team 7. The transformation was complete in ways that went far beyond operational readiness. The team that had once questioned her authority now defended it fiercely. The men who had resisted change now championed the higher standards she had implemented. And the operators who had tested her at every opportunity had become her most loyal supporters. The deployment to the Middle East had been scheduled for weeks, and now the day had arrived. The team gathered in the hangar at 0400. Their gear packed and staged, families saying tearful goodbyes in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah moved through the crowd, shaking hands with spouses, promising to bring their husbands home safely. Holding children who clung to their fathers with small, desperate hands, Amy Webb hugged Marcus tightly, whispering something in his ear that made him smile despite the gravity of the moment. Sarah gave them privacy, moving to where Dan was coordinating the final logistics checks. "Everything ready?" she asked. "As ready as we'll ever be," Don replied. He was not deploying with them, staying behind to manage administrative functions and serve as the liaison with headquarters. "You've done good work preparing them, Sarah. They're as sharp as I've ever seen." Sarah watched the team loading equipment onto the transport plane. Travis was helping a younger operator secure his ruck, showing him a better way to distribute the weight. Ryan was double-checking medical supplies with the team corpsman, his earlier carelessness replaced by meticulous attention. Derek was running through communications checks, ensuring every radio and backup system functioned perfectly. "They did the work themselves," Sarah said. "I just gave them a reason to care about excellence." The boarding call came over the speakers, and families began their final goodbyes. Sarah stood back, waiting until everyone else had boarded before climbing the ramp herself. She took her seat near the front, strapping in as the engines roared to life. Across from her, Travis caught her eye and nodded. It was a simple gesture, but it carried weight. Respect, trust, acknowledgement that they were in this together. The plane lifted off as the sun began to rise, golden light streaming through the small windows. Sarah closed her eyes and ran through mental checklists, reviewing intelligence briefings, contingency plans, and the 100 details that could mean the difference between mission success and disaster. The deployment zone was classified, but Sarah knew it well. She had operated there before, understood the terrain and the threats, the complex political dynamics that made every mission a careful balance of force and diplomacy. The team's mission was counter-terrorism operations, working with local forces to identify and neutralize high-value targets. They landed at a forward operating base after 16 hours of travel, exhausted but focused. The base was a sprawl of temporary buildings surrounded by concrete barriers and guard towers. Home to several hundred American and coalition forces, Sarah's team was assigned a section of the compound, a cluster of buildings that would serve as their living quarters, operations center, and planning space. The first week was spent establishing routines and building relationships with the other units on base. Sarah attended commander briefings, reviewing threat assessments and ongoing operations. Her team conducted local area familiarization, learning the surrounding terrain through reconnaissance missions and coordination with intelligence personnel. On day 8, they received their first mission tasking. A high-value target had been located in a compound 40 kilometers from the base. A terrorist leader responsible for multiple attacks on coalition forces. The intelligence was time-sensitive, the window for action narrow. Sarah called her team leaders together in the operations center, spreading out satellite imagery and intelligence reports across the table. "We've got 72 hours to plan and execute. Marcus, your platoon has primary assault. Jake, Bravo provides security and backup. This is a capture mission, not kill, so we need precision." The planning session lasted 6 hours, every detail examined and challenged. Sarah pushed them to consider contingencies, to plan for Murphy's Law, to anticipate the ways things could go wrong. When they finally had a plan that satisfied her, she sent them to brief their platoons while she coordinated air support and extraction assets. The mission launched at 0200, with the team inserting via helicopter under the cover of darkness. Sarah rode with Alpha Platoon, her presence both symbolic and practical. She would not ask her people to take risks she was unwilling to share. The helicopter ride was loud and turbulent, the pilots flying low to avoid radar detection. Sarah checked her weapon one final time, running through her own mental checklist. Beside her, Travis gave her a thumbs up, his expression calm despite the approaching danger. They landed 500 meters from the target, the helicopters dropping them in a dry riverbed before immediately lifting off. The silence after the engine noise faded was profound, broken only by the soft crunch of boots on sand as the team moved into formation. Sarah activated her night vision, the world turning green and eerily bright. She could see Marcus at the front of the column, his hand signals precise as he guided them toward the target. The compound appeared ahead, a collection of buildings surrounded by a low wall. Jake's team split off, moving to their security positions around the perimeter. Marcus led Alpha toward the main building, their approach silent and swift. Sarah stayed close, trusting her training and the team around her. The breach was textbook perfect. A small explosive charge blew the door inward, and the team flowed through the opening like water, each operator clearing their sector with practiced efficiency. Shouts erupted from inside the building, confused voices calling out in Arabic. Sarah moved with the second wave, her weapon up, covering her assigned angles. The compound was larger than the intelligence had suggested, with more rooms and more occupants. The team adapted instantly, communicating through hand signals and whispered radio calls. They found the target in an upstairs room surrounded by bodyguards. The firefight lasted less than 30 seconds. Precise shots neutralizing the guards while the target was tackled and Flex cuffed by Ryan. No civilian casualties. No friendly casualties, the target secured alive. Package acquired, Marcus reported over the radio. Moving to extraction point, but extraction was when missions often went wrong, and this one was no exception. As the team moved back toward the landing zone, small arms fire erupted from a nearby building. Someone had rallied a response force, and now they were trying to block the team's escape route. Contact, right? Jake called out. His team returned fire, creating suppression while Alpha moved the target to safety. Sarah assessed the situation quickly. They were outnumbered but better trained, with superior night vision and weapons. The key was not getting pinned down and missing their extraction window. Derek, use the drone, she ordered. Get me a count on enemy forces and their positions. Derek launched their small reconnaissance drone, which immediately provided overhead imagery. Sarah studied the feed, counting approximately 15 fighters in scattered positions. Jake, they're trying to flank you from the east, Sarah called out. Travis, take your fire team and block that approach. Travis led 3 operators to intercept the flanking movement, and within minutes, the enemy advance stalled. The firefight intensified but remained controlled, the team maintaining fire discipline and superior tactical positioning. The extraction helicopters arrived on schedule, their door gunners providing additional suppression fire. Sarah coordinated the withdrawal, ensuring everyone reached the landing zone safely. The team boarded rapidly, the target secured between 2 operators. And the helicopters lifted off as enemy fire pinged harmlessly off their armored hulls. Back at base, the mission was declared a complete success. The target was handed over to intelligence personnel for questioning, and the team began their post-mission procedures, cleaning weapons and equipment, writing reports, decompressing from the adrenaline. Sarah found Travis in the maintenance area, carefully cleaning his rifle. He looked up as she approached. Good work out there, she said. Your reaction to that flanking movement probably saved lives. Travis smiled, but there was something serious in his expression. Commander, I wanted to thank you for giving us a second chance back in San Diego, for seeing past what we did and believing we could be better. You earned that second chance, Sarah replied. Every day since then, you've proven I made the right decision. Still, a lot of commanders would have just crushed us and moved on. You taught us instead. That means something. Sarah nodded, accepting the thanks. We all make mistakes, Travis. What matters is what we learn from them and who we choose to become afterward. She moved through the team, checking on each operator, ensuring everyone was physically and mentally sound after the mission. This was part of leadership too, the less glamorous work of caring for people, building trust through consistent presence and genuine concern. The deployment continued for 6 months, with 17 additional missions executed with similar success. The team developed a reputation for excellence, for professionalism, for getting difficult jobs done without collateral damage or unnecessary casualties. Other units requested to work with them. Commanders sought Sarah's advice. Admiral Crawford sent a congratulatory message after a particularly challenging operation. But the true measure of Sarah's success came in quieter moments. It came when Marcus told her that his platoon had started holding weekly discussion sessions about leadership and ethics. Inspired by her example, it came when Jake admitted that he had been wrong to doubt her and apologized for his initial resistance. It came when the youngest operators on the team spoke about wanting to be like Commander Mitchell when they reached leadership positions. Most powerfully, it came on a quiet evening for months into the deployment. Sarah was walking past the common area when she overheard a conversation between some of the operators. They were talking about female service members in general, and one of the younger men was making dismissive comments. You don't know what you're talking about, she heard Travis say firmly. I've served under male and female commanders, and I'm telling you that gender has nothing to do with capability. Commander Mitchell is the best CO I've ever had, and that's because she's competent, fair, and demands excellence. That's what matters. Travis is right, Ryan added. I used to think like you that women didn't belong in combat roles. Then I actually worked with them and realized I was being an idiot. The women I've served with are just as tough, just as skilled, and just as dedicated as any man. Maybe more so because they have to prove themselves constantly, Eric's voice joined in. The commander changed this team for the better. Anyone who can't see that isn't paying attention. We're better operators, better leaders, and better men because of what she's taught us. I'd follow her into any fight, any time. Sarah moved away before they could see her, not wanting to embarrass them or herself. But their words stayed with her, warming something deep in her chest that she had not realized was cold. That evening, she wrote in her journal, a habit she had maintained throughout her military career. She wrote about the mission's successes and the challenges overcome. She wrote about watching men who had once disrespected her become vocal advocates for equality and respect. She wrote about the satisfaction of leading people to excellence, of changing minds through actions rather than arguments. Most importantly, she wrote about hope. Hope that the military was changing, that the next generation of female operators would face less resistance than she had. Hope that her success would make the path easier for those who followed. Hope that someday, a woman commanding a SEAL team would be unremarkable rather than noteworthy. The deployment ended with a formal ceremony on the base, with the team receiving unit commendations for their performance. Sarah stood before her operators, looking at faces weathered by months of combat operations. Seeing pride and satisfaction in their expressions, what we accomplished here was significant, she told them. But more important than the missions we completed was how we completed them. With professionalism, with respect for everyone we encountered, with commitment to excellence in everything we did. You represented the SEAL community with honor, and I'm proud to have served alongside you. She paused, emotion threatening to crack her professional bearing. When I took command, some of you doubted whether this would work, whether I could lead you effectively, whether the changes I was implementing were necessary. You gave me a chance to prove myself, and together, we've shown that excellence knows no gender. That leadership is about character and competence, not about fitting traditional molds. Travis stepped forward from the formation. Ma'am, the men asked me to speak on their behalf. He glanced back at his teammates, who nodded encouragement. We were wrong. Not just about you, but about a lot of things. You taught us that being a SEAL means more than being tough or skilled. It means being honorable, respectful, and constantly striving to be better. You challenged us, pushed us, and sometimes made us uncomfortable. And we're better for it. He extended his hand. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for showing us what excellence really looks like. Sarah shook his hand, then found herself surrounded by the rest of the team. Operators stepping forward to shake hands, to offer thanks, to express appreciation. Some of the hardest men she had ever met had tears in their eyes, and Sarah felt her own vision blur. This was why she had endured 15 years of doubt and discrimination. This was why she had pushed through SEAL training when every muscle screamed for her to quit. This was why she had taken command of a skeptical team and demanded they meet higher standards. Not for personal glory or to prove a point, but to make a difference. To change lives. To show that leadership transcended all boundaries when it was grounded in competence, character, and genuine care for people. The flight home was long but joyful, filled with stories and laughter and the easy camaraderie of people who had faced danger together and emerged stronger. When they landed in San Diego, families were waiting, and Sarah watched as operators were swept into embraces by wives and children who had missed them desperately. Amy Webb hugged Sarah tightly before releasing her to embrace Marcus. Thank you for bringing him home, she whispered. He brought himself home, Sarah replied. I just gave him the tools to do it safely. Don was waiting for her at the base, his smile wide. Welcome back, Commander. I've been hearing amazing things about your deployment. Admiral Crawford wants to meet with you tomorrow. Good news or bad news? Definitely good. I think you're going to like what he has to say. That night, alone in her quarters for the first time in 6 months, Sarah stood at the window looking out at the ocean. The same ocean she had looked at on the day of the change of command ceremony. When everything had been uncertain and challenging, now, 3 months later, she had proven what she had always known. That women could lead SEALs effectively. that change and excellence could coexist, that respect and high standards reinforced each other rather than conflicting. Her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Travis. "The guys want to know if you'll join us for dinner tomorrow. We're celebrating our deployment, and we want you there. You're part of the team, ma'am." "Always will be." Sarah smiled and typed her response. "I'll be there. Wouldn't miss it." As she set down her phone, she thought about the cafe where this journey had really begun. About 3 men dumping beer on a woman they perceived as lesser, unworthy of respect. About how that moment of disrespect had become a catalyst for transformation, not just for those 3 men, but for an entire team. Leadership was never easy, and being a woman in a male-dominated field added layers of complexity that could not be ignored. But Sarah had learned that challenges could become opportunities, that resistance could be transformed into support, and that patience combined with uncompromising standards could change hearts and minds. Tomorrow she would meet with Admiral Crawford to discuss the next phase of her career. Tomorrow she would celebrate with her team and continue building the culture they had created together. Tomorrow she would face new challenges and new opportunities. But tonight she allowed herself to simply feel satisfied. She had taken a team that doubted her and turned them into advocates. She had proven that excellence transcended gender. She had made a difference that would ripple forward, affecting the next woman who took command, and the one after that, and the one after that. Sarah Mitchell, the woman who had beer dumped on her by men who did not know she would soon command them, had become the leader who transformed those same men into champions of respect and equality. That transformation, more than any mission success or operational achievement, was the legacy she was most proud of. And it was only the beginning.